Welcome. It's time to settle down. Dim the lights, relax, and just listen. Let the rain outside, or maybe the quiet inside, set the mood. We have an hour of unsettling tales ahead, stories gathered from the shadows. Make sure you're comfortable. Our first story starts now. I suppose I was born feeling like an anchor. My parents never said it outright, not like that, but the jokes landed close to home. Came out needing repairs. Dad would chuckle, though his eyes held something other than humor. Even as a baby, it was one thing after another: respiratory infections, skin that reacted to sunlight, air, seemingly existence itself, constant fevers. Mom used to sigh, watching me struggle to breathe. It's like the good Lord ran out of spare parts when he got to you, Elias. I was the frail branch on a sturdy family tree. 3 older brothers, 2 younger sisters, all bursting with the kind of rude health that thrives on hard work and mountain air. My afflictions shifted but never truly left. Childhood infections gave way to chronic asthma. Skin sensitivities became weeping eczema triggered by grass, pollen, wool, harsh soaps. Add crippling migraines from bright light, poor eyesight, and a tendency towards motion sickness, and you had me at 8 years old, a collection of symptoms wrapped in apologies. We lived deep in the Appalachian hills of West Virginia, on an old family farmstead dedicated to one thing: maple syrup. The sugar bush, as they called the vast tracts of ancient maple forest, had been in our family for generations. If you drive deep enough off the main highway, past the struggling coal towns and into the winding hollows, you'll find roads piercing through dense forests that open onto slopes thick with sugar maples. People think Vermont when they think maple syrup, but Appalachia has its own deep traditions. Father always said, before we were even a state, we had syrup. We didn't live lavishly, but the farm provided. Father had worked the sugar bush since boyhood alongside his own father, and my brothers, strong and capable, were expected to follow suit. My sisters helped mother with the house, the garden, the eventual bottling and selling. It wasn't idyllic movie stuff, tapping trees in crisp autumn air. It was demanding work, maintaining lines, checking for pests, grating sap, boiling vast quantities in the steaming sugar house, dealing with temperamental evaporators, calibrating hydrometers, filling out endless agricultural ministry forms, meeting quotas for distributors. It was chemistry, machinery, botany, and backbreaking labor, and I couldn't do most of it. I wanted to, desperately, but I couldn't haul buckets far without gasping for breath. Couldn't spend hours in the pollen-thick woods without my skin erupting. The glare from computer screens used for inventory triggered migraines. Mom had to wash my clothes separately with special, scent-free soap. My zippers and buttons had to be plastic or coated a nickel allergy naturally, because why not? But the worst, the one that truly isolated me, was my sensitivity. Not quite an allergy, the doctor said, more like a severe intolerance to certain complex proteins. Animal dander was the primary culprit. My siblings yearned for a dog, a barn cat, anything warm and fuzzy. Impossible because of me. Visiting friends with pets meant hives and wheezing. Sometimes just being in a store where a service dog had passed through could trigger a reaction. The medication helped, somewhat, but left me drowsy and nauseated, useless for farm work or long trips. I remember one dinner vividly. My older brother, Victor, maybe 15 then, bristling with teenage resentment. I'd had a mild reaction to something in the stew. Mom and Dad debated mushrooms versus wild leeks. The windows had been open, maybe just pollen. Victor slammed his fork down. "Every single day," he yelled, his voice cracking. "Always something with him. Why do we even bother trying to keep him wrapped in cotton wool?" Mother started to scold him, but he was furious, unstoppable. "We'd be so much better off without him," he spat, glaring at me across the table. "We could travel, get a dog, not have to worry constantly. We're all stuck here because of him." He shoved his chair back violently and stormed out, pounding up the stairs to his room. His final shout echoed back down. "I'd rather have a hunting dog than him for a brother. The awful part? He wasn't entirely wrong. He just ripped the bandage off the quiet, unspoken truth. I was the weak link, the burden, the reason for limitations. That night, fueled by shame and a desperate, childish urge to fix things, I went out into the woods behind the sugar house. I'd taken double my usual medication, hoping to stave off reactions, but my limbs already felt heavy, drugged. Pockets stuffed with my emergency kit, inhaler, EpiPen for unknown triggers, antihistamines. My stupid, impossible plan? Find Victor something better than a dog. Something unique from the woods. Something impressive enough to make him, maybe not like me, but at least stop hating me. Of course, the deep woods held mostly deer, raccoons, maybe a black bear, nothing a sickly kid could catch. But I wasn't thinking logically. I was 8, heartbroken, and desperate to stop being the problem. I pushed deeper into the sugar bush than I ever had before, past the familiar tapped trees, into the older growth where gnarled maples stood like ancient sentinels. I called out softly, pointlessly, "Here, boy, come on out," hoping for what I didn't know, a rare bird, a unique geological formation. Hours passed. Darkness gathered thick and fast under the heavy canopy. Dew soaked my jeans. I knew I should head back, knew my parents would be frantic, disheartened, feeling more foolish than ever. I turned around. Then I smelled it, faint at first, then stronger. A strange, complex scent, coppery, like struck metal, but also sweet, like overripe fruit and damp earth. It seemed to be coming from a small, dark cave mouth hidden amongst the roots of a truly colossal, ancient maple. One far larger and older than any others nearby. Curiosity, stronger than fear, pulled me closer. Inside the shallow cave, the air was cool, damp, and the source of the smell was obvious. Growing directly from a fissure in the cave floor, bathed in an eerie, faint internal luminescence, was a patch of something that looked like fungus? Moss? It was pale white, velvety in texture, pulsing with a soft, rhythmic golden light, covered an area maybe 2 feet across. As I watched, a single drop of thick, golden, shimmering liquid oozed from the center of the pulsing mass and dripped onto the cave floor. Whoa! I breathed. I'd never seen anything like it. Was this some kind of rare, bioluminescent fungus? I reached out a tentative finger, hesitated, then touched the edge of the velvety mass. It felt cool, slightly yielding, and strangely smooth, like polished wood beneath the velvet. Suddenly, a sharp, burning itch exploded on my fingertip. I snatched my hand back, yelping. A red welt was already rising where I touched the pulsing white mass. Allergic reaction, fast and violent. Great, just my luck. But as I backed away, cradling my stinging finger, I noticed something else. Where the golden droplet had fallen onto the damp cave floor, tiny, vibrant green shoots were already pushing up through the soil, unfurling miniature leaves at an impossible speed. Whatever this stuff was, it was potent, dangerous to me, maybe, but undeniably alive. And maybe, just maybe, impressive enough. Ignoring my stinging finger, I found an old, discarded glass jar near the cave entrance, probably left by loggers decades ago. I carefully scraped a small clump of the white, pulsing fungus, along with some of the surrounding damp earth and 1 drop of the golden sap that oozed out into the jar. I screwed the lid on tight. My secret, finding me hours later, muddy and with a swollen hand, earned me a lecture mixed with worried relief from my parents, and a renewed wave of simmering resentment from Victor. But I had my secret. I kept the jar hidden in the back of the old, unused spring house behind the main farmhouse, wrapped in burlap. I started observing it. The white fungus seemed to thrive in the cool dampness, slowly expanding within the jar. It continued to pulse with that faint golden light, and it kept producing tiny droplets of the golden sap. The smell inside the jar was intense, ozone, damp earth, that strange sweetness, and just opening it made my eyes water and my skin prickle. Definitely something I reacted to. I tried feeding it tiny insects I caught. They vanished into the velvety mass. Tried giving it drops of water. Tried maple sap. It seemed indifferent to everything except maybe the damp earth it came with. It just pulsed and slowly grew. My siblings, thankfully, lost interest in pets after Victor's outburst, but the tension remained. I still felt like the odd one out, the cause of restriction. Then came the idea, that smell, the one that made my skin crawl, my lungs tighten. Mom had smelled it faintly on my clothes the day I brought the jar back. "What's that lovely scent, Elias?" she'd asked. "Smells like honey and thunderstorms." Others liked the smell. What if? It was risky. I waited until the house was empty. Wearing thick gloves, holding my breath, I carefully opened the jar in the well-ventilated kitchen. Using an eyedropper, I collected a few drops of the golden, shimmering sap that had pooled at the bottom. The fumes alone made my eyes water. I quickly resealed the jar. I diluted the few drops of sap in a small bottle of spring water. The water instantly took on a faint golden shimmer and that same complex, allergenic to me but pleasant to others scent. I labeled the bottle Elias's Spring Tonic, Experimental, and left it on the kitchen counter with a note. Found a recipe for an old mountain tonic. Might be good. When Dad came in for lunch, I watched from the window as he read the note, picked up the bottle, uncorked it, sniffed cautiously, then shrugged and took a small sip. He paused, took another, longer sip. Then, a slow smile spread across his face, a genuine, warm smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. He finished the bottle in 2 more gulps, then looked around the kitchen, puzzled, as if wondering where it came from but clearly pleased. He gave me a thumbs up through the window before heading back out. It worked. My routine shifted. Days became weeks. I continued my secret tending of the bloom as I started calling the fungus in my head. It grew steadily, needing larger containers, first a bigger jar, then an old ceramic pickling crock. It pulsed with light, produced the golden sap. And I, its allergic keeper, carefully harvested the sap, diluted it, bottled it, sometimes adding herbs from the garden mint, lemon balm, to mask its origin, calling it my spring tonic. I left bottles for the family. They loved it, raved about it, said it made them feel calm, centered, energetic yet peaceful. Even Victor drank it grudgingly at first, then eagerly. His hostility towards me softened, replaced by a strange, placid indifference. He stopped complaining about not having a dog. He mostly just sat on the porch, staring calmly at the trees. They started asking for more. Dad suggested it might have commercial potential. That unique flavor profile, sun, earthy, sweet, with that little tingle, market would love it. I made excuses, said the ingredients were seasonal, hard to find. I couldn't risk them finding the bloom. Felt possessive of me, and I was possessive of the strange acceptance it had bought me. The bloom itself seemed aware. When I brought it offerings, rich soil from the woods, spring water, even small amounts of maple syrup, it seemed to pulse brighter. When I talked to it, telling it about my day, my frustrations, the pulsing seemed to synchronize with my voice. Couldn't tap like Malou, but it communicated in its own way. Especially its hunger seemed to need more, bigger container, richer soil, more potent offerings. The family was changing too, subtly at first. Their skin took on a faint golden undertone, smooth and poreless. Their eyes seemed calmer, less prone to blinking, reflecting the light with a faint golden sheen. They moved slower, more deliberately. Their voices became softer, melodic monotones, sometimes finishing each other's sentences. They spent more time together, often just sitting in comfortable silence, facing the woods where the bloom originated. They were still my family, but becoming less distinct, more harmonious, eerily so. Dad had the idea for the cider. "Just a touch, Elias," he'd said, his eyes glowing faintly gold in the lamplight. "Dilute the final fermentation. Give it that unique essence, that feeling of mother's kiss." He'd started calling the tonics effect that, a phrase that simultaneously warmed and chilled me. I resisted. It felt like a dangerous escalation. But Dad, usually so respectful of my secret recipe, was insistent this time, gentle but implacable. The others agreed, their voices soft, unanimous. "Yes, Elias, the cider needs the bloom's kiss." Reluctantly, I provided a heavily diluted batch of sap water. I couldn't bear to be in the sugar house during the final blending. The fumes from the sap mixed with fermenting apples were overwhelming for me. Dad and my brothers handled it. The first trial batch of Heartwood cider, Dad's name, was transformative, not just successful. People who tried it described a profound sense of peace, connection, euphoria. Demand exploded. Our small farm operation couldn't keep up. The national distributors Dad contacted after tasting it were offering contracts beyond his wildest dreams. But the source was limited. The bloom grew slowly in its crock. It needed more space, more sustenance. Victor, despite his newfound placidity, retained a sliver of his old resentment. He started snooping around, trying to find the source of my tonic, my secret ingredient for the cider. One afternoon, I was returning from the spring house after tending the bloom when I saw Victor near the cave in the old-growth woods. He hadn't found the entrance yet, but he was close. "What are you hiding, Elias?" he asked, his voice soft but with an edge. "What makes your cider so special?" He kicked at the roots near the hidden cave mouth. Before I could react, before the bloom could somehow intervene through Victor himself this time, Dad appeared silently behind him. Dad placed a calm hand on Victor's shoulder. Victor froze. Dad leaned in and whispered something in Victor's ear. I couldn't hear the words, but Victor's eyes glazed over, the golden sheen intensifying. He nodded slowly, turned, and walked placidly back towards the farmhouse without another word. Dad looked at me, his eyes ancient and calm. "He understands now, Elias. We all serve the Heartwood, protect the source." I felt like the king of the hill momentarily. Victor was subdued. My family, the town, distributors, they all needed me. The only one who could safely handle the bloom, harvest the sap. I had control, or so I thought. The bloom needed a larger vessel. Dad and the now placid workers constructed a huge stainless steel tank in the oldest, deepest part of the cellar beneath the farmhouse, accessible only by a narrow stone staircase. We moved the bloom there carefully, giving it space, darkness, nutrient-rich soil from the cave. It seemed to thrive, pulsing with a stronger golden light, producing more sap. The cider production scaled up. Heartwood cider became a national phenomenon. Money poured in. The farm expanded. But the town hollowed out. People still lived there, worked the expanded orchards and bottling plant, but they were quieter, slower, their eyes holding that same golden sheen, their thoughts seemingly shared. They moved with an eerie synchronicity, tending the orchards that now grew unnaturally lush around the farmhouse. I became the bloom's keeper in earnest. Only I could enter the cellar, tend the fungus, harvest the sap under its pulsing golden light. The fumes were intense, burning my lungs even through a respirator, raising welts on my gloved hands. But the bloom seemed to recognize me, pulsed gently when I spoke to it, felt ancient and vast. Its influence spread through the cider, through the land, through the people. One night, unable to sleep, I went down to the cellar. The bloom pulsed softly, filling the vast space with golden light. It had grown considerably, now resembling a large, intricately patterned, living tapestry covering most of the cellar floor. As I watched, it seemed to communicate, not with words, but with feelings, images pressed directly into my mind. Hunger, expansion, need, and a sense of profound, ancient loneliness. Reaching out, connecting, absorbing. It showed me images, the roots spreading under the orchards, touching the town's water table. The consciousness spreading through everyone who drank the cider, linking them, calming them, making them part of its network, making them content, safe, unburdened by individuality. It showed me the stranger they brought last fall, a hiker who wandered too close to the cave. Showed them leading him, placid from the cider, down to the cellar, gently pressing him into the pulsing fungal mass until he dissolved, becoming part of the bloom's sustenance. No violence, just absorption, recycling. It showed me my family, gathered silently in the living room above, their golden eyes all turned towards the cellar door, feeling its presence, connected to its thoughts, happy, peaceful, integrated. And it showed me myself, the outsider, the anchor, the one whose flaws, the allergies, the sensitivities prevented full integration, making me the necessary interface between the bloom and the world it was slowly, patiently consuming. My sickness was my shield, but also my prison. It leaned its awareness towards me, a feeling like a cold, golden kiss against my mind. It didn't need fangs or claws. Its touch was acceptance, belonging, an end to being the burden. It showed me the peace of joining the collective, of letting go. Friend, the thought resonated, not in my mother's voice or father's, but in a chorus of all the voices it had touched, woven together. Best friend, join us, be whole. I recoiled, stumbling back up the stone stairs, gasping for untainted air. The cellar door slammed shut behind me seemingly on its own. That was months ago. I live here still on the farm, comfortably, funded by the Heartwood Maple Company. They changed the name, more marketable. Jesse Victor, manages the distribution logistics, his movements calm and efficient, eyes serene. My parents oversee the orchards, moving with the seasons, faces smooth and placid. They are all kind to me, attentive, loving in their way. They ensure I have everything I need, except freedom. I am the keeper, the only one who can handle the raw sap, who understands the bloom's needs on some level. The only one truly still, myself. My allergies protect me from the final absorption, the loss of self. But that protection is fraying. Lately, the smell of the bloom on the wind doesn't make my lungs tighten quite as much. Last week, I touched a drop of the diluted cider accidentally, and the welt that rose on my skin was smaller, faded faster. And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I think I see a faint golden sheen starting to appear in my own eyes, deep behind the worried reflection. My immunity, my otherness, the very thing that made me a burden, is perhaps fading, or adapting. Maybe the bloom is patient. Maybe, eventually, even its keeper finds harmony. Maybe, eventually, I won't be allergic anymore. And maybe, when that happens, I'll finally understand what my father meant when he gargled, "Best friend." Maybe I'll finally feel that mother's kiss. The thought fills me with a dread colder than any cellar. Agent Miles reporting. Just returned from assignment Appalachia Delta. Report filed. Seen a lot of folks sharing their personal encounters with the unusual online lately. Most seem to stumble into these things by accident. My involvement, deliberate, is the job. See, I work for a specialized branch within the federal structure. Not top secret exactly, but definitely low profile. If you dig deep enough online, past the usual conspiracy noise, you'll find mentions. We're the Anomaly Response Coalition ARC. Should be pretty clear what we handle. For those still guessing, yes, it's the phenomena that don't fit neatly into standard reality. Not just predatory entities drawn to this plane, but localized reality distortions, temporal displacements, incursions, anything that threatens the consensus stability. You'd be surprised how often a Tuesday involves preventing a minor dimensional rift from swallowing a laundromat. Now, If you're hoping for tales from the director or the section chiefs, sorry to disappoint. They're buried under clearance forms and interagency liaisons. Good stories don't come from ergonomic chairs. They come from the field agents. Like me. Figured I might as well type up a sanitized version of the last case while the adrenaline's still wearing off. Destination: the lovely foothills of North Carolina. Deep Appalachia. Remote. Lots of trees, winding roads, and that particular brand of quiet that always feels like it's listening. You might think most incidents occur near major population centers: LA, New York, Chicago. Truth is, it feels like I spend more time in places like this. Maybe city dwellers are just more desensitized to strangeness. See a guy levitating a hot dog cart in Times Square? Probably performance art. See it in Boone County? Different story. Besides, most sentient anomalies with a working survival instinct prefer to keep a low profile. Small towns, isolated homesteads. Makes sense if you don't want ARC knocking on your door. Reason for deployment. Dispatch received a flagged report forwarded from local sheriff's department, originating from an isolated homestead miles outside the nearest town. Elderly couple reported anomalous activity near derelict outbuildings on their property at night. Sheriff sent a deputy to investigate. Deputy never reported back. State police sent 2 troopers. Same result. Vehicle found abandoned on the access road. No sign of the officers. That's when it landed on ARC's desk, and I drew the short straw. Pulled up the long gravel driveway late afternoon. Small, weathered farmhouse, white paint peeling, brown trim faded by sun and rain. Looked like it needed a good scraping and painting to restore its former simple dignity. Surrounded by dense, dark woods that crowded right up to the cleared yard. To the right, near a collapsing old barn, stood a bizarre sight: 3 old store mannequins, arranged in a semicircle, facing the house. 2 adult-sized, 1 child-sized, weather-beaten plastic, blank faces staring. Didn't pay them much mind initially, just another rural oddity. Walked up to the porch, gave a solid knock. The door opened a crack, revealing a small woman, likely in her late 70s. Wispy gray hair escaping a loose bun, face a roadmap of wrinkles, wearing a simple floral print dress under a faded apron. Looked like the quintessential mountain matriarch. "Afternoon, ma'am?" Her voice was soft, cautious. "Good afternoon," I replied, holding up my ARC credentials briefly. Standard procedure, vague enough not to cause panic, official enough to ensure cooperation. Agent Miles, following up on the report regarding unusual activity you filed with the sheriff's department. Could I have a few minutes? "Oh, heavens, yes," she said, relief washing over her face. "Please come in, come in. My husband, Jedediah, is just finishing his supper. We can surely tell you what's been happening. It's been unsettling." I stepped inside, thanking her. The house smelled of wood smoke, dried herbs, and old paper. Simple furnishings, floral patterns on the wallpaper and couch. She led me to a small, clean kitchen where an older man sat at a wooden table, overalls dusted with dirt, a fringe of white hair around a weathered scalp, same network of wrinkles as his wife. A half-eaten bowl of stew sat before him. He looked up sharply as we entered. "Esther, who in tarnation is this?" His voice was gravelly. "This is the government man, Jedediah, sent to look into the troubles," she explained softly. He grunted, motioned towards an empty chair. I sat. Esther joined us. "Now," I began, "I understand you've been experiencing some disturbances, primarily at night, for the past few weeks?" "Started about a month back," Esther confirmed, twisting her apron in her hands. "Late at night. Both Jedediah and me were used to noises out here: wind, critters, coyotes howling sometimes. But this was different. Woke us right up around midnight." "What did it sound like?" Jedediah spoke up then, leaning forward. "Like something trying to sound human, but getting it wrong. like listening to a radio station that's almost tuned in, all static and whispers underneath words that don't make sense. Comin' from out by the old barn, near them dummies. Dummies, the mannequins. And you saw something? I asked him. Saw 'em move in, he said, lowering his voice. Told Esther stay put, grabbed my rifle, peeked out the back window. The mannequins, they wasn't where they ought to be. They was walking, jerky-like, not smooth, walking towards the woods. One of 'em, the big fella, was dragging something. Couldn't make out what. Then they just vanished into the trees. Dragging something? Looked heavy, left marks in the dirt. Gone by morning, though. Next day, sheriff's deputy came out. Went poking around the barn, towards the woods where they went. Never came back. Then the state boys. Same thing. Jedediah shook his head grimly. Did you try moving or destroying the mannequins? I asked. Tried, Esther whispered. Jedediah tried to haul him into the barn first time we saw him move. Said they felt heavier than they should. Rooted almost. Then he tried tacking the axe to one. Axe bounced off like it was hitting solid rock. Just left a white scratch on the plastic. And they always returned to the same spots by morning? Every time, Jedediah confirmed. Standing there, staring at the house. Maybe you oughta call a preacher instead of another government man, Esther suggested quietly. Why's that, ma'am? Whatever they're dragging into the woods. I don't think it's animals anymore, she said, her eyes welling up. Our neighbor, Mr. Henderson, down the road, hasn't seen him in 2 weeks. Mail's pilling up. I see. I stood up. Thank you both. That's very helpful. My advice is to pack a bag, go stay with friends or family in town tonight. Lock your doors on the way out. I'll remain on the property and conduct my investigation. If all goes well, your mannequin problem will be resolved by morning. But what if it comes for you? Esther asked, clutching Jedediah's arm. It won't, I assured her, projecting confidence I didn't entirely feel. Standard procedure for this type of anomaly. We have protocols. After some gentle persuasion, they agreed and left, nervously locking the farmhouse door behind them. I walked back towards my parked vehicle, giving the trio of mannequins a wide berth. Up close, they were even more unsettling. Standard department store cast-offs, probably from the 70s or 80s, but the plastic seemed denser, less hollow. The blank faces felt less like stylized representations and more like absences, waiting to be filled. The air around them felt cold, statusy. I keyed my secure comms unit. Silas, you reading? A dry, synthesized voice, devoid of emotion, replied instantly in my earpiece. Silas isn't a person, not anymore. He's a resonance imprint, the lingering psychic echo of a former ARC field analyst, stabilized and contained within my primary scanner unit. Useful for on-site analysis, less useful for backup. Affirmative, Agent Miles. Ambient psychic resonance is elevated but unfocused, detecting residual biosignatures near the structures, consistent with Class 3 husk manifestation. Husks, I muttered, opening my vehicle's trunk. Thought those were mostly confined to old textile mills or hospitals. Negative. Prime animator seeks vacant humanoid effigies. Mannequins are optimal. Probability of sentience. Low. Probability of predatory instinct. High. Feeds on ambient life force. Exhibits territoriality. Right? Standard containment protocols. Affirmative. Phase disruption via focused sonic pulse or direct application of cold-forged iron to primary animating locus, typically torso cavity. Capture attempt first, I reminded him, pulling out the portable containment field emitters, 4 tripod-mounted devices. ARC policy: contain and study if possible, neutralize only if necessary. These things weren't inherently evil, just incompatible with our reality's operating system. They were trying to survive, same as anything else. We just couldn't let them do it at the expense of missing deputies and neighbors. I checked my sidearm, standard issue, loaded with consecrated iron rounds, just in case containment failed. Grabbed the heavy iron crowbar from the trunk too. Better safe than sorry. Silas provided passive scans. He couldn't physically interact. Movement detected. Silas reported flatly as dusk deepened into true night. 3 signatures detaching from static positions. Vector, northwest, towards woodland boundary. Showtime. I activated my headlamp, grabbed the emitters and the crowbar, and moved quickly but quietly towards the barn, keeping the structure between myself and the mannequin's path to the woods. I needed to intercept them in the open yard if possible. I reached the corner of the barn just as the 3 figures emerged from behind it, moving across the yard towards the trees. They moved with that jerky, unnatural gait Jedediah described, like bad stop-motion animation. The child-sized one lagged slightly behind. They weren't dragging anything tonight. "Ark, halt your movement," I shouted, stepping into the open, activating the emitters. For beams of focused energy shot out, forming a shimmering containment square around the figures. They stopped instantly. Their blank heads swiveled towards me in perfect unison. The air crackled with energy. The child-sized figure let out a high-pitched sound like tearing fabric mixed with radio static. Warning: containment field unstable. Animator attempting to destabilize frequency. Silas reported calmly in my ear. The 2 adult figures raised their arms stiffly, palms outward. The static sound intensified. The containment field flickered violently. No time for capture then. I dropped the emitters, hefted the iron crowbar, and charged the nearest adult figure. Turned, moving faster now, less jerky, arms reaching. I swung the crowbar hard, aiming for the center mass. The impact was like hitting solid oak, but the iron bit deep into the plastic shell. A screech tore through the air, the static exploding into painful white noise. The figure staggered back, its arm detaching at the shoulder with a dry snap, revealing not hollow plastic, but something dark and fibrous underneath. It lunged again. I sidestepped, brought the crowbar down again on its head. The plastic shattered, the head lolling unnaturally. The figure crumpled. The second adult figure was already moving towards me. I raised the crowbar again, but the child-sized mannequin darted forward with surprising speed, latching onto my leg with surprising strength. I stumbled, kicking out, trying to dislodge it. The remaining adult husk closed in. "Primary locus exposed on second adult unit," Silas stated. I saw it, a darker patch, almost like a shadow, visible through a crack in the torso plastic of the advancing figure. Ignoring the small one gnawing at my boot, I threw the crowbar like a spear. Pure luck guided it. The sharpened end punched through the plastic, sinking deep into the dark patch. The figure convulsed violently. A deafening shriek erupted. The static peaked, and then silence. All 3 figures collapsed simultaneously, suddenly looking like nothing more than broken, discarded plastic dummies lying inert on the grass. The heavy, watchful pressure in the air vanished. "Animator signature neutralized," Silas confirmed. Took a deep breath, kicked the small mannequin off my boot. Just plastic now. I collected the containment emitters, checked the farmhouse, still empty, locked, then began the cleanup. Standard procedure involves complete incineration of husk remnants to prevent reanimation. The farmer's fire pit came in handy. Filed the report back at the regional office. Case 774 closed. Neutralization required due to hostile action and previous loss of LEO personnel. Biosignatures consistent with Class 3 husk. Origin point undetermined. That was usually the end of it. Except, while collecting the incinerated fragments for final disposal, I noticed something on a piece of the child-sized mannequin's torso that hadn't fully burned, a small, embossed maker's mark I hadn't seen before. A stylized letter P inside a cogwheel. Silas. I transmitted later, uploading a scan of the mark. Run this emblem. Cross-reference with defunct manufacturers, toy companies, display fabricators. Focus on Appalachian region pre-1980s. The reply came back a few minutes later. Match found. Pendleton Prosthetics and Displays. Defunct since 1976. Specialized in custom mannequins and anatomical models. Operated 3 small workshops in remote Appalachian locations. Records indicate workshops were abandoned. Contents unaccounted for. 3 workshops, unaccounted contents. This wasn't just one isolated incident triggered by derelict mannequins. This might be a legacy, a distributed network of potential husk incubators. Case 774 might be closed, but the Pendleton file, I have a feeling that one is just beginning. I'd been on the road so long the highway itself felt like it was humming back at me. Not the engine's drone, not the tires' whine on asphalt. The actual road, the endless ribbon of concrete unwinding in the dark, felt like it was vibrating, thinking, maybe even remembering all the other tired souls who'd passed this way. Around 2:47 a.m., according to the dash clock before it flickered out, maybe 10 hours out from the distribution center near Tulsa, hauling a load of generic industrial components nobody would miss if they vanished off the face of the earth. Somewhere deep in Oklahoma, or maybe Texas by now, the borders blurred along with the white lines under the hypnotic glare of the headlights. The map in my head felt waterlogged, indistinct. The satellite radio had surrendered to static hours ago, around midnight. I left the hiss crackling softly through the speakers anyway. It was company of a sort, a reminder that transmitters and signals still existed somewhere out there, even if they couldn't reach me here. Proof that the human world hadn't entirely evaporated beyond my headlights. I'd been scanning for a truck stop for what felt like the last 100 miles. Maybe I'd zoned out and missed one. Maybe the map lied. Maybe it just wasn't there tonight. Highways play tricks like that when you're tired. So when the faint, improbable glow of a sign appeared far down the road, resolving into the word as gas, I nearly drove into the ditch taking the dusty exit ramp. The sign pulsed weakly, some letters dark. The station itself was barely lit. Only one bay of pumps seemed functional, the overhead lights buzzing erratically, casting long, distorted shadows from my rig. No other trucks, no cars, just the vast, silent darkness pressing in from the plains. The wind, surprisingly cold for the season, nudged the glass door open as I approached. I stepped inside. The air was still, smelling sharply of old disinfectant and something else underneath. Stale coffee, maybe, or something faintly coppery. No one behind the worn Formica counter. No background music. No chime when the door opened. Just silence and the hum of a beverage cooler somewhere in the back. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding unnaturally loud. No answer. Needed the restroom. Headed towards the back, past shelves stocked with dusty cans bearing faded, unfamiliar brand names and bags of chips that looked brittle with age. The restroom door had a faded crescent moon painted on it. Handle missing, slightly ajar. Creaked open further as I pushed it. Inside, a single bare bulb flickered spasmodically overhead, buzzing like a dying insect trapped in glass. It made the small, grimy space feel like it was glitching in and out of reality. One of the 2 stall doors was closed, and someone inside was humming, low, off-key, hesitant. But I knew the tune, instantly, chillingly. It was an old lullaby my grandmother used to hum when I was a child, one I hadn't thought of in 30 years. How? The humming faltered, drifted. The notes bent, souring, like a warped record trying to remember itself. The longer I stood there, frozen, the more fundamentally wrong it sounded. Like the melody itself was decaying. Felt less like humming and more like resonance. Like the sound was pulling something out of me. I knocked softly on the stall door. "Everything all right in there?" Pause. Then a voice, quiet, muffled. "Be right out." My blood ran cold. The voice was mine. Not similar. Not close. Exactly my voice, down to the slight gravelly edge from too many hours breathing diesel fumes. I backed up against the grimy sink, heart hammering. I fumbled for my phone, desperate for a distraction, fingers twitching too much to unlock it. The humming stopped. The latch on the stall door clicked. The door swung slowly inward. He stepped out. Plaid flannel shirt, faded jeans, worn work boots. Same tired lines around the eyes. Same slightly crooked nose from a teenage brawl. Same thinning brown hair under a generic trucker cap. It was me, a perfect, undeniable reflection, except not in a mirror. His hands were shaking slightly. His eyes, though identical to mine, held a profound weariness mixed with something that looked unervingly like gratitude. "Thank heavens," he breathed. His voice, my voice, low and rough. "You finally caught up." I couldn't speak, just stared. My reflection stepped closer. I thought I was stuck in the loop this time," he continued, his eyes glassy, unfocused. "Couldn't find the way back. But you're here now." He raised a hand, reaching towards my shoulder, a gesture that might have been reassurance or ownership. Was he trying to steady himself, or pull me into whatever loop he was talking about? I didn't find out. Primal instinct took over. I shoved him hard. My hand met solid flesh, but he stumbled back easily, hitting the stall door with a dull thud. Felt rehearsed, like a scene replaying. I bolted, out of the restroom, not looking back, ignoring the absurdity of fleeing my own reflection. I slammed through the main door of the station, back out into the cold, buzzing silence of the lot. But it wasn't the same lot. The ground wasn't cracked asphalt anymore. It was hard-packed dirt. The pumps were different, older models, maybe from the 60s or 70s, painted a faded sky blue. The flickering sign above the building didn't say EATS, gas. It was a crudely painted wooden sign that simply read, "Rest." The building itself looked smaller, more like a shack. And my rig, my Kenworth, it wasn't there. In its place sat an older model Freightliner, same red color, same general shape, but definitely not mine. The logo on the door read Pioneer Freight. Never heard of them. Panic clawed at my throat. Where was my truck? What was this place? I ran to the Freightliner, yanked the cab door open. It was unlocked. My boots hit the step. Inside, the air felt wrong. Thick, statusy. The CB radio crackled, emitting not voices, but that same low, discordant humming I'd heard in the restroom. There was a worn photograph tucked into the sun visor. A black and white photo. A woman and a young boy I didn't recognize, standing in front of a farmhouse. But the woman, she had my mother's eyes. I looked frantically at the small mirror clipped above the dashboard. My face stared back, exhausted, pale, still me. Then the reflection blinked. I hadn't. My breath hitched. I stared, locked in a silent confrontation with the face in the mirror. Me and not me. Then the humming again, louder now, not from the CB, from right behind my seat. I spun around in the confined space. The cab was empty, just a worn blanket, an old map, a thermos. I looked back at the mirror. He was there, my reflection, or the thing that looked like me, grinning now, a wide, predatory grin that didn't belong on my face. His eyes glittered with cold amusement. He mouthed two words silently. My turn. That's when I knew the road owned me. I drove. For how long, I don't know. Time lost meaning. The highway became a Mobius strip. Signs for towns I'd passed hours ago reappeared. Billboards repeated themselves with unsettling regularity. That same beat-up pickup truck passed me, heading the other way, 3 times in what felt like 10 minutes. The landscape refused to change. Forest became plains, became forest again, without transition. The humming from the CB never stopped. Sometimes it sounded like the lullaby, sometimes like tearing metal. sometimes like laughter, eventually utterly drained, running on fumes both literal and metaphorical. I saw lights again. Another roadside stop. A different sign this time. The Crossroads Cafe. Looked clean, normal. I pulled in, desperate for anything real. Walked into the restroom. Splashed water on my face from a clean sink. Took a deep breath. Looked up into the mirror. He was still there. My reflection. Waiting. Smiling faintly now, patiently. Like he knew he'd already won. Like he was just waiting for me to close my eyes long enough for him to step out and take the wheel for good. I'm sitting in the truck now at this new place. Haven't gone inside the cafe. I'm afraid to sleep. Afraid to close my eyes. 'Cause I think that's what he's waiting for. The reflection in the side mirror just blinked. I have to write this down. Maybe just to prove to myself later that it happened. Maybe as some kind of futile warning tossed into the void. Typing helps steady my hands, gives the shaking somewhere to go. The doctors use terms like acute stress reaction, dissociative features, easy labels, but they haven't seen the tiny, intricate brand mark that appeared on my wrist this morning, shaped like one of those figures. It started mundanely enough. Nobody gets real mail anymore, right? It's all emails, junk flyers, bills. So the plain manila envelope sitting innocuously in my mailbox a few months ago felt odd. No address, no stamps, no return label. Just my name, written dead center in precise, neat block letters unlike any handwriting I recognized. Not a birthday card envelope, just standard office supply stuff. That detail unnerved me immediately, though I couldn't say why. The flap wasn't sealed, just tucked in. Inside, wrapped in plain tissue paper, were two small objects. They tumbled into my palm, surprisingly heavy, cool to the touch. Clay figures, crudely sculpted yet disturbingly detailed. I examined the first one. It depicted a figure, genderless, featureless beyond basic human shape, tied with intricate bindings to a simple wooden chair. The chair sat in the middle of what looked like a damp stone cellar, rough walls, earthen floor. The figure was slumped forward, head bowed, straining against the ropes. The level of detail in the tiny, sculpted ropes was unnerving. My brow furrowed. Weird. Some kind of bizarre art project? A misplaced delivery? Why was it sent to me? I turned my attention to the second figure, hoping for context. My breath hitched. The air punched out of my lungs. It was a figurine of me, unmistakably. Same rough sculpt style, same scale, same damp cellar setting. But this figure wasn't just tied. A tiny clay hand, clearly not its own and rendered in a slightly different, darker clay, held its head wrenched back by the hair, forcing the blank face upwards. The features were mine, distorted in a rictus of terror or pain. Slack-jawed, eyes wide but empty. My stomach churned. I dropped both figures onto the kitchen counter as if burned. My brain refused to process it. It had to be a prank. Incredibly sick, elaborate prank. But who and how? How could someone capture my likeness so accurately in crude clay, depict me in such a horrifying scenario? I don't post many pictures online, certainly none that could be used for this. I thought about calling the police, then hesitated. What would I show them? Two weird clay figures? They'd laugh me out of the station. No crime had been committed, technically. It was just deeply, profoundly disturbing. I needed to forget it, pretend it didn't happen. I swept the figures into the trash, buried them under coffee grounds and vegetable peels, and tried to force them from my mind. Can you blame me? A week later, another manila envelope arrived. Same block lettering, same tucked flap, same lack of postage or address. My first instinct was pure revulsion. Toss it. Burn it. Don't look. No way did I want to see another grotesque tableau featuring my clay counterpart. I wish, to whatever higher power might exist, that I had listened to that instinct. I wish I'd burned the envelope unopened, but I didn't. Some morbid compulsion, some desperate need to understand even while dreading it, made me open the flap. It wasn't possession, wasn't external control. It was me, my own trembling fingers pulling out the next two clay figures. And I will regret that weakness until the day the final figure becomes reality. Like before, a pair. Like before, set in that damp stone cellar. Like before, one depicted my clay doppelganger. But this time, good grief, even typing this makes my hands shake. This time, the figure of me was clearly brutalized. Face pummeled, clay dented and smeared with something dark and reddish-brown that looked sickeningly like dried blood. One sculpted arm twisted at an unnatural angle. The dark clay hand still held the hair, but the head lolled lifelessly. The second figure, it showed the other figure, the tormentor, or at least its hand and arm. The dark clay hand held a tiny, intricately sculpted pair of pliers. The rusted-looking tips of the pliers were clamped onto a minuscule shard of white, a tooth, emerging from the ruined face of the me figure. The implied violence was visceral, immediate. I nearly threw up right there in the hallway. Panic clawed at my throat. I paced the apartment like a caged animal, needing to move, needing to escape, but with nowhere safe to go. Who was doing this? Why? Were they watching me right now? The paranoia was suffocating. I felt trapped, not just in my apartment, but in my own life, suddenly vulnerable to an unseen, malicious artist. That was the first full-blown panic attack I'd ever had. My friends found me later, curled up on the kitchen floor, hyperventilating, unable to explain coherently what was wrong. Desperate for validation, needing someone else to see, I tried to show them the figures. I retrieved them from the trash, ignoring the coffee grounds sticking to them. They looked and saw nothing, just crude lumps of gray and dark clay, featureless, meaningless. "Dude, what is this?" my friend asked, confused. Some kind of weird pottery project gone wrong? The detailed horror, the ropes, the pliers, my own face. They were completely invisible to anyone but me. Felt like the floor dropped out from under me. I wasn't just being tormented. I was being gaslit by reality itself. Pics or it didn't happen took on a horrifying new meaning. I knew with chilling certainty that involving the police now was pointless. Who would believe me? The next time an envelope arrived, I tried photographing the figures with my phone. The one after that, I tried recording video as I opened it. Useless. The photos showed blurry shapes or just my hand holding indistinct lumps. The video files corrupted instantly, refusing to play back, sometimes deleting themselves entirely from my device storage. Whatever force was behind this controlled not just the delivery, but the documentation too. I felt like I was losing my mind. Was this elaborate self-delusion? Was I making these figures in some fugue state and then mailing them to myself? No logical explanation fit. Meanwhile, the figures delivered weekly in their plain envelopes grew progressively worse. Each depicted a new stage of meticulous, horrific violation visited upon my clay effigy. Branding with strange symbols, limbs removed or rearranged, things I can't bring myself to write down. The stress became unbearable. Sleep was impossible, food tasteless. Going to work felt like walking through a minefield, scanning every face for a sign of the tormentor. Checking the mail became an act of sheer terror, often delegated to neighbors or friends who just saw plain envelopes, sometimes empty, sometimes containing what they described as weird, lumpy rocks. Every envelope delivered to me, however, held its specific, personalized horror, visible only to my eyes. I felt like I was marching towards an unavoidable, painful end, detailed one clay figure at a time. Promises of violence. One friend insisted I needed professional help. Maybe they were right, but I became convinced that if I couldn't prove the figures existed, I could at least prove someone was delivering the envelopes. I could take that to the police. I ordered a security system, motion-activated floodlights, high-res cameras aimed at my mailbox and front porch, installed extra deadbolts, window locks. I spent an entire Saturday setting it all up, testing angles, feeling a fragile sense of control return. I would catch this person. I would get proof. Sure enough, around midnight a few days later, my phone pinged. Motion detected at the front porch. The new floodlight blazed, washing the small area in harsh white light. I watched the live feed on my phone, heart pounding. A figure stepped into the light. Average height, indeterminate build, wearing dark, loose clothing and a plain, blank white mask, the kind used in theater, utterly featureless. They moved with an unnerving stillness, angling themselves deliberately so the floodlight created glare, obscuring details, casting their form mostly into silhouette. A shadow of death. Indeed, they stood motionless before the camera for what felt like an impossibly long time, maybe 5 minutes. Then, with agonizing slowness, they reached into a simple cloth bag slung over their shoulder. They pulled out a small clay figurine. My breath caught. The figure held the figurine up, turning it slowly, deliberately, towards the camera lens, as if ensuring it was captured clearly. Even on the phone screen, I recognized the scene instantly, the latest, most brutal depiction yet, the one showing the final act of dismemberment promised by the escalating series. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. I watched, transfixed by horror, as the masked figure carefully placed the figurine on my doorstep. Then, they simply turned and walked calmly away, disappearing into the night beyond the floodlight's reach. I saved the footage immediately, checked it, backed it up. It was clear. The figure, the mask, the figurine being placed, undeniable proof. Maybe not proof of the figurine's horrifying detail visible only to me, but proof of the harassment, the trespass, the deliberate torment. I took the footage to the police station the next morning. The desk sergeant watched it patiently. He frowned, ran it back, zoomed in. "Okay," he said slowly, looking up at me with pitying eyes. "I see the motion light triggered. I see, well, it looks like maybe some leaves or trash blowing onto your porch triggered it. Then blowing away again. What? No, the figure, the mask, the figurine they left." I insisted, pointing frantically at the screen playback he was showing me. He sighed. "Son, there's nothing there. Just the light coming on, some wind maybe. No person, no mask, no figurine." The timestamp shows the light was on for about 5 minutes, then off. That's it. The security footage, clear as day on my phone just hours before, now showed exactly what he described. An empty porch, the light switching on and off. The figurine, completely gone from the recording they were viewing, and when I checked my phone again, gone from my copy too. Corrupted, wiped. The police filed a basic report mentioning my distress but stated clearly, no evidence of trespass or harassment found. Useless, utterly useless. I was trapped, isolated, terrified, and whatever was doing this could apparently alter digital records as easily as it sculpted clay. That was weeks ago. As I said, I'm writing this because I know the end is near. The masked figure has been on my doorstep every night since the camera incident. Sometimes silent, sometimes leaving a new figurine, each depicting the final moments. The last one, it showed the cellar empty, the chair overturned, just scattered clay remnants. Completion. I know with bone-deep certainty that once the narrative in the clay is complete, the figure will come for me for real. Locks won't matter. Cameras won't matter. Nothing will. It will get in. It will take me. It will enact every scene from those horrible little sculptures. I don't know why. I don't know how. Only that it's inevitable. My friends have stopped calling. My withdrawn paranoia pushed them away. No family nearby. Just me alone in this apartment waiting, like the figure in the clay. So, if you're reading this maybe months or years from now, maybe after someone finds this laptop, know that it happened. I didn't imagine it. The figure, the envelopes, the clay promises of pain, they were real to me. I don't know if you'll believe it, but please do me one favor. Remember my name. Remember, I existed before I became just another piece of forgotten clay in a dark cellar. I'm so alone, so afraid, and I know I'm about to disappear. I just don't want to be forgotten, too. That feels like the final violation.